Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion with Chris Castro about the Inflation Reduction Act. We're really excited to have you here. We have just a few more people joining, so if you can just hang tight for about 30 seconds, we'll let them in, and we ask that everybody mutes themselves, and we'll get started here in just a minute.
Okay. Good to see some familiar faces out there.
All right.
Where are you located, Sarah?
I am in the mountains of Colorado.
Wow, it's a nice
Yes.
place to be.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
I'm in New York.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion with Chris Castro about the Inflation Reduction Act. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I'm Sarah Gutterman. I am the CEO and co-founder of Green Builder Media, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Today's discussion is part of Green Builder Media's Today's Homeowner content, which is brought to you by some of our favorite partners, Whirlpool, Jinko Solar, Sonos, MyQ by LiftMaster, and Vivint. Now, we generally use GoToMeeting for large webinars and events, but we're on Zoom today because this discussion is intended to be a part of our next generation influencer group, which is just an incredible group that we have pulled together of young professionals who are doing awesome things in sustainability. And we get together with this group several times a year, or several times throughout the course of the year, discuss topics like decarbonization, demand side energy management, electrification, and other leading edge topics. If you'd like to learn more about the Next Generation Influencer Group and possibly join, check out the link that Samantha Carlin from our team is posting in the chat box. Now, typically when we have these next generation discussions, they're intimate enough so that we can have an open discussion. But since there was just so much interest in today's meeting, we're going to ask that participants stay on mute while Chris is talking. And then he actually has some questions for the group that he will ask at the end of his presentation. And if you have questions during his presentation, please just chat them to me privately. And then we'll call on people at the end, just kind of based on the time that we have. And we'll be able to facilitate a discussion then. Now, we all know, and we're here because the Inflation Reduction Act has been touted as the single largest infusion of federal cash aimed at tackling climate change in US history. It's very exciting. It allocates $369 billion to reduce domestic carbon emissions, boost renewable energy implementation, drive innovative technology adoption, electrify transportation, and provide incentives for sustainability upgrades in homes and buildings. And so we are absolutely thrilled that our dear friend, Chris Castro, Chief of Staff for the Office of State and Community Energy Programs at the US Department of Energy, is here with us today to tell us as much as he possibly can about accessing IRA funding and incentives and tax rebates in homes and buildings. Now he'll share with you that there's still a lot that's still under consideration and undetermined, so he won't have all the answers today. But I know that he'll be a wealth of information and certainly provide as much insight as he possibly can to us. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Chris, he previously served as the senior advisor to Mayor Buddy Dyer and Director of Sustainability and Resilience at the City of Orlando in Florida. He's well known for his entrepreneurial efforts, including being the co-founder and president of organizations like Ideas for Us, Citizen Energy, and Fleet Farming. He's also a founding director of Climate First Bank, the first B Corp community bank in Florida, that's working to advance ESG and local investing for sustainability and decarbonization solutions. And on a personal side, Chris has been a dear friend for over a decade He is just an incredible human being. In his relatively young life and career, he's already saved a woman's life. And don't be surprised if at some point you see Chris Castro for president, and he'll certainly have my vote. So Chris, I'll adamantly deny it at this time. So Chris, before I hand it over to you, we do ask that everybody please mute yourself while Chris is presenting, just because you never know these days in the era of Zoom, we get cats and dogs and streaking naked kids and all kinds of things that have become normal, and we love them, but we don't necessarily want to hear them while Chris is talking. So please mute. And again, if you have questions, please chat them directly to me, and we'll have a facilitated discussion at the end of the call. So Chris, with that, please take it away. I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah, and to all of you who've been able to join this afternoon. It's quite a pleasure. And for those who are going to watch later as it's recorded, thank you for attending. Again, my name is Chris Castro. I have the honor of serving here at the U.S. Department of Energy as the Chief of Staff for a newly forming office. And today's presentation, I will be touching on the IRA and giving some insight on some of both the credits as well as some of the rebates that DOE is helping to support, but also wanted to give you insight on the bipartisan infrastructure law and a lot of the funding that is looking to go to our communities, right? A lot of this funding going through states, but also down to cities and counties, to school districts, to nonprofits and others. And we're in such an incredible time here in history and in this administration, and I'm looking forward to diving in. So with that, I think it's important to kind of just start out level setting with how important addressing the climate crisis is for the Biden-Harris administration. Quite frankly, coming into this new role, one of the major reasons why I decided to make this big pivot was because we had leadership now that truly understood that there really is no greater challenge facing our nation and our planet than the climate crisis. And what the Biden-Harris administration is thinking about, especially with the new funds that have been released, is how do we turn this crisis into an opportunity? I've actually given a Pachaka talk before, and I remember being trained by Al Gore in the Climate Reality Project, and he mentioned that the Sino character for danger, or for crisis, sorry, is two words in the Chinese language: danger and opportunity. And I think we're at this point where the opportunity for us to revitalize U.S. energy and manufacturing sectors, for us to boost incredible amounts of job creation and economic development, as well as addressing the historic environmental injustices and inequities. This is our moment. This is the opportunity at hand. DOE investments are directly aligned with these administrations' both near and long-term goals for climate and clean energy. And in the science, down into the details, we essentially need to hit a few major goals and milestones in order to achieve this zero carbon future we're all striving towards. And as you can see here, really the main goals that we're striving at the department are getting us to 50 to 52% reduction in emissions by 2030 compared to 2005 levels, hit 100% of our electricity sector being powered by clean energy by 2035, and eventually getting to a net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050. And the interesting part about this moment in time, literally in the last year, from November 2022 to November 2023, we've had 4 of the most historic actions taken by Congress and the federal government, really for any country in the world, to address this crisis. We had the bipartisan infrastructure law last November, and that really kicked us off. We then passed the CHIPS and Science Act earlier this summer, the Defense Protection Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. And when you look at these 4 different acts, they play very critical roles in the transition to an economy-wide transformation, right, towards clean energy. Obviously, the CHIPS and Science is really focused on manufacturing and resilient supply chains. You have the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is focused on dollars to put infrastructure in the ground and transition fossil to clean energy, right? And then you have IRA, which are these consumer rebates that ultimately allow consumers to drive forward this market. And so it's really the perfect storm for climate action is what I'm calling it. It's not just IRA, it's not just bill on its own, It's really the combination of all of these, and it's going to show that our leadership really is thinking holistically about how this transition happens. So the Department of Energy, because of bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, Bill and IRA, I'm going to call them moving forward, because of these two acts, DOE has gotten an infusion of about $100 billion above its annually appropriated funds in order to drive the deployment of climate and clean energy infrastructure solutions. And very quickly, our Secretary Jennifer Granholm realized that DOE, in the 45-year history that DOE has been an agency in the US government, it has been focused on primarily research and development of the cutting edge technologies that we're using today. It has a network of 17 national labs. It's primarily been focusing on trying to unlock these clean energy innovations at the lab scale and then demonstrations, but it has never really been a deployment agency, an agency that focuses on deploying infrastructure. And so this is a whole new mission. Quite frankly, the secretary said, we need to reorganize the Department of Energy to meet the mission. And so now it's not just research and development and deployment and demonstration, but it's also this deployment mission. And as a result, we needed to think differently about it. So she quickly created the Office of Infrastructure in the Department of Energy, and it's staffed by an undersecretary. That shows you the level at which this is now in the organization. There are 8 program offices that have been assembled under this infrastructure pillar, and those and 4 of them are new, including the SKEP office. And so state and community energy programs really is intending to be this center of excellence to support communities with accelerating the deployment of climate and clean energy. It's intending to bring what has historically been fragmented across the department in terms of funding provisions and technical assistance for those stakeholders, and bring them all under one office that really looks through the lens of place-based strategies to drive forward clean energy adoption. And so SKEP, what we call SKEP, was born. And our ultimate goal are extending the capabilities of states, tribal governments, local governments like cities and counties, school districts, even community serving organizations and nonprofits to facilitate and implement high impact, self-sustaining clean energy projects at scale, and that center the needs of low income and disadvantaged communities. So that's really the ultimate goal behind this office. And we do so through a lot of funding. This particular office oversees and manages $16 billion with a B worth of resources. These are formula grants that Congress sets a formula for, and we administer to primarily states. It is also competitive awards, competitive grants, consumer rebate grants, and technical assistance. And in the rest of today's presentation, I'm going to try to demystify all of the different types of opportunities that are coming down the pike, some of which have started to roll out, some of which will roll out into 2023 and beyond. And that's the exciting part, is that this isn't just a flash in the pan for the next year or two. This is a decade. This is basically priming the pump for the next decade of action to transition towards our climate goals that I mentioned earlier, but ultimately towards this clean energy economy. Now, Justice 40, you might have heard of the executive order that President Biden signed just a day into his role as president of the United States. And Justice 40 essentially is an executive order that states that 40% of the benefits of all of the federal government resources, whether it's Bill and IRA and some of these bigger acts or annually appropriated programs, that 40% at minimum go to benefit disadvantaged communities. Now, there's a definition for disadvantaged communities that our DOE Office of Economic Impact and Diversity has created. We call it the ED office. And as you can see here, we've identified 8 policy priorities within the Department of Energy writ large, but certainly centered in SKEP, for us to, tie our funding and technical assistance programs to. And those include things around reducing energy burden, as you can see there, accessing low-cost capital for these communities, helping to promote clean energy job training and a pipeline of those jobs, and of course, moving towards energy democracy, where we can support communities with owning these assets and owning the benefits that come from them. One slide that I wanted to just mention is around the energy injustices today, focused on energy burden. In my role in Orlando, we've been working for years on trying to figure out how to address this disproportionate energy burden we're seeing in low income and in BIPOC communities. And so there are several studies showing that the difference could be 3 and 4 times what an affluent, community member is paying on their utility bills, on average being around 3% nationally. Some people are paying 6%, 8%, 10% plus of their annual or of their monthly household income going to paying their utility bills. And there's a lot of issues behind why that is. Mainly they're renters. There's this landlord-tenant complex, right, in terms of the split incentive of doing these retrofits. But long story short, the funding that we're intending to roll out is really squared at trying to get to these injustices, and energy burden being a big one. So I felt it was helpful to show you an overview, an org chart of SKEP. This is the office at which I'm serving as our chief of staff. And you can see that at the top, we have our director, Dr. Henry McCoy, who's been leading the charge in North Carolina. He used to be the Assistant Secretary of Commerce in North Carolina for a long time. And so he's leading the charge. And then underneath, you can see these various divisions of the organization. And those divisions are broken out into these big funding categories. Weatherization Assistance Program, the State Energy Program funding, Community Energy Program funding, partnerships and technical assistance, and then lastly, this aspect around community engagement, which I'd love to talk more about towards the end of my presentation and get some input from you all about that. But in short, you can see that there's $16 billion across this, and just as a quick setting point here, the legend is that everything blue here is bill funding, everything red is or pink is IRA funding, and then everything purple is annually appropriated dollars that come to the office. And so you can see that there is, over almost 24 different funding provisions that SKEP at this point in time is helping to manage and design programs for. So I want to dive in and give you all a little bit more of an idea of what these programs are intending to do, with the first one being the Weatherization Assistance Program. This actually is one of DOE's oldest whole home energy efficiency programs, and it carves out money every single year, about $300 million per year, that goes to supporting the weatherization and efficiency of low-income households. This is about ensuring and improving health and safety in people's homes. It's about keeping homes warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and it goes to the neediest community members. And the good news is that this has a great boost in funding because of the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's now $3.2 billion of weatherization assistance on top of the annual $300 million, which allows us to do a lot more homes. Every year, on average, about 35,000 homes are weatherized across the country at no cost to the renter or owner. Because of the bill, we're going to see about 500,000 homes be weatherized. So a considerable bump up in the benefits of that program. And of course, it's not just enough to support low income. Sometimes there is an opportunity to get creative at how we, improve non-energy home repairs. And so we have funding called the Weatherization Readiness Fund for non-home energy repairs. There's also enhancement and innovation that can go beyond weatherization for things like home electrification, enhancing health and safety in the homes, even training individuals from underrepresented communities in the energy field. And so there are 2 pots of money within weatherization that allows us to go beyond just the allocation of weatherization assistance. And we continue to get creative. In fact, there's a whole working group at the Department of Energy and across multiple agencies to think about how do we improve the weatherization assistance program. As an example, in statute, we only can provide about $8,000 per household in statute. And when you're thinking about electrifying our HVAC or our water heating systems, most of those are beyond an $8,000 all-in cost. And of course, with rebates, we're going to start to see those come down. But the point is it doesn't give you a lot of room to do real deep retrofits in homes. It really just does our weatherization, our insulation, our caulking, our ductwork, etc. So weatherization is fantastic. state energy program is the second big division. And this is also a 40-year program that DOE and Congress has approved every single year to 50 states, 5 territories, and Washington, D.C. And essentially, this is formula money, meaning when I say formula money, I mean that Congress has basically set out a formula of how much money each state is going to get. So we don't decide that. And they also outlined what that money could be used for. And as you can see here, it's primarily 3 big goals of the state energy program. Let's enhance energy security. Let's advance state-led energy initiatives, primarily focused on efficiency. And third, let's improve energy affordability. Let's get at this energy burden problem that we're seeing in cities across the country. So SKEP's extremely effective. For every dollar invested, $4.50 is saved. And as you can see there, we're starting to see a significant amount of jobs created as a result. So the one thing that I wish I knew when I was in Orlando is the importance of building a relationship with our state energy offices. I had a great relationship with Kelly Smith Burke and the state of Florida's energy office when I was there in Orlando, and we had done some projects, but there's a lot more that we could have done if I was aware of the resources that they had and what their missions were. And so I would encourage you all out there to reach out to your state energy offices. They are going to be receiving and managing a lot of this bill and IRA money. And by you building a relationship, I think it could really improve your chances at trying to bring down those resources for your communities to benefit your communities. There are additional provisions within the bipartisan infrastructure law that are carved out for the state energy program. And the one I just wanted to highlight here is the third column that you see there. And that's what's called the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund Capitalization Grant. These are grants, $250 million, that states are going to be able to receive via a formula in order to reallocate, to reloan for public and private commercial building improvements. So as a local government, often access to low-cost capital is an issue. Well, guess what? Our state energy offices are now going to get a grant to help create a revolving loan fund where they're going to lend out that money to cities and school districts and nonprofits and for-profits to make these energy improvements. And the whole idea is to create an ongoing, obviously, revolving loan initiative into the future. So keep an eye out for that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to work with your states on accessing some of that capital. Okay, pivoting now to some of our community energy programs, and I'll tell you, EECBG is one of the most sought after kind of programs that we have in SKEP. And it's because it is a formula grant that goes to cities and counties all over the country. In fact, to more stakeholders and more eligible entities than any grant in the department by a long shot. For those that aren't aware, EECBG was originally authorized during the Recovery Act back in 2007, and it was funded during the Recovery Act at a huge amount. $3.2 billion back in 2009 was put into this program, and it has not been refunded and reauthorized until now, until the bipartisan infrastructure law. This is a big deal, because like the state energy program formula, which goes to these state energy offices, this is a formula that goes to cities and counties directly. And the whole idea is to reduce fossil fuel emissions, decarbonize, reduce total energy use, so drive efficiency, and of course, improve not just efficiency of our buildings, but the transportation and other relevant sectors. And so it's very broad in terms of what you can use EECBG for. This shows you a good graphic of how Congress said DOE needs to break up the money via the formula. So you can see that 98% of the money goes directly through a formula grant to these cities and counties. And local governments are going to be getting this based on the size of their governments and the number of people based on the 2020 census that they have in their jurisdiction. There is money that will go directly to tribes, 2%. There's money that goes directly to states, this 28% down here. And then there are competitive grants that will be opened up for local governments that don't receive a direct allocation. So that's important to note. If your community is a small township and maybe doesn't have enough population to get a direct allocation, there still will be an opportunity for you to apply to your state energy office to get EECBG funding. The state will administer for each individual for their local governments. So all that said is, and you can see the eligible uses 1 through 15, it's a lot of things. It's actually buying equipment to do energy efficiency retrofits. It's hiring personnel to have capacity in your energy office or your sustainability office to do this work in perpetuity and plan it. It can go towards, leasing or installing rooftop solar or, EV charging infrastructure. I mean, a whole wide range of things. EECBG is pretty much open-ended. But I will say that we have 1/6 the amount of money this time around than we did originally. So we have less money and we have about 400 more communities. There's 2,700 plus communities that will be getting a direct allocation. So as a result, we need to be looking at this as like a stepping stone. EECBG is the most flexible. How might your communities use EECBG in order to plan and be more competitive to bring down the larger dollar amounts from the rest of the money that I've been talking about, right? So think about that. EECBG is definitely one of those you want to keep your eye on. Pivoting over to nonprofits and schools. In fact, just last week, we released a notice of intent, an NOI, where we will be coming out this month in November with a funding opportunity announcement, what we call a FOA, which is basically a grant application. And so we're going to open up the ability for you all, for local education agencies and school districts to be able to apply for funding to make improvements to reduce overall energy costs, to improve the health and well-being, and ultimately drive forward clean energy infrastructure. So in public schools, this is the first time DOE has ever had funding that goes directly to public schools. And so this is a precedent that we're hoping Congress realizes is a huge need and continues to fund on an annual basis. Now, I will say that there's over $30 billion of deferred maintenance in schools in America alone. And this total grant is 500 million, right? So it's not going to meet the mark of retrofitting all of our schools, not even close. So the idea is, how do we get creative at leveraging this money to bring in the private sector and other partners and scale this work? So the proposals that are going to be most competitive will be very creative at leveraging this money, taking a $200,000 grant and expanding it to be $20 million of energy efficiency or $2 million of energy efficiency, right? How do we leverage that money and bring in private sector through energy saving performance contracts and others in order to do that? So stay tuned. This month will be a big announcement that you can begin to apply to. And then nonprofits. I'm very excited. I'm somebody who's really passionate about 501c3s, and there is dedicated money for charitable organizations, $50 million that goes to improvements, repairs, and renovations to help nonprofits reduce their own energy costs and improve their own facilities. You can think of this money, obviously we want to try to support our homeless shelters, our food banks, our training facilities and academia. So start to think about that. We will have later this month an RFI requesting information from the public to help us craft this program and better understand the ways that we can select the winning grants. So RFI will be one way that you can put your feedback and input in the process. I know that there's a lot of grants here. I'm almost through the funding. So we have 2 new exciting annually appropriated grants. These are not through bill or through IRA. They were given to us through an annual appropriation by Congress. One's called the Local Government Energy Program. And the cool thing about this is we know that there's a lot of communities that have the capacity and are moving the ball forward towards decarbonization. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, that don't have a sustainability coordinator, that don't have an energy manager on board. These are rural and remote. These are tribal governments. And ultimately, we now have a grant program that is intending to support those disadvantaged communities with on-site capacity, peer exchanges to bring together other communities and help accelerate their work, and even some deep technical assistance to help them through any given project, whether it's building a community solar program, whether it's EV related, whether it's building codes. The local government energy program is a competitive grant, again, that could be applied and do a lot of stuff. And so we're in program design, but early next year, I think end of Q1, we will have information going out about that grant. And so keep an eye out for your small townships and smaller communities that often are left out, right? This is money dedicated to them. Energy Futures Assistance Grants. This is another annual program. And the whole idea behind this is creating community partnerships. One of the things I tout about Orlando, and the reason why we're really moving the ball very quickly, is because of our culture of partnerships and collaboration. The partnerships between the city and other quasi-governments like the utility and transit and airport, but also nonprofits and the private sector, academia. I mean, there's a need for everybody to play a role in this transition. So Energy Futures Assistance Grants are really identifying projects that bring together unique partnerships to think through financial and technical planning. It could be energy systems planning. It could be an integrated resources plan for your utility. It could be thinking through how to improve building codes for building performance standards to start getting at the energy burden. I mean, there's a lot of things, but the whole idea is we're trying to force partnerships through this grant and bring a city and a CBO and a utility and others to the table to move this forward together. So pretty cool. We can't do any of this if we're not beginning to train the next generation of workforce for meeting the moment. And so I did want to take a quick moment here to just talk about 3 workforce development and training grants that SKEP will manage. The big one is the Energy Auditor Training Program. Those are competitive grants that will go to states to create programs that train residential and commercial energy auditors. And so as you can see, over the next 4 years, we anticipate about 20 awards per year to go out. And the idea is to get creative about how do we train up the next generation of efficiency workforce. Secondly is this BTACs, Building Technology and Assessment Centers. These are grants to help higher education institutions and other partners to build these efficiency training centers and actually almost living labs. We're actually going to partner with the industrial assessment centers that the Department of Energy funds at universities across the country. And we're gonna try to see if we can build upon the IAC model to include more commercial and multifamily type trainings. So that's really exciting. And then lastly is career skills training. That's the 10 million that essentially goes to conduct on-the-job trainings for installing energy efficiency building technologies. And so it could be these new heat pumps that we keep hearing about. It could be rooftop solar. It could be EV charging infrastructure. It could be a bunch of other connected distributed energy resources, right? But the need for on-the-job training is critical, and so that can help fund apprenticeship programs and the like. So IRA, and I know that this is something that everybody is excited to learn more about, and we're so excited as well. I'll say that IRA basically is broken out into 2 different, in my mind, 2 different lanes. One is the tax credits, right? Tax credit lane. And as you can see here, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of tax credits that are now approved by Congress. $37 billion on the building side to help consumers and businesses with renovations of their homes to drive efficiency. On the transportation side, $14 billion of tax credits for things like the new clean vehicle tax credit for used EVs, as well as new EVs, right? And others. The production and manufacturing tax credits for large scale solar, right? The ITC and the PTC production tax credits. These are big movers of the renewable energy industry. $161 billion of incentives, huge. And then lastly, workforce development. Back to that, there are specific provisions, which I'll mention here shortly, that try to get at supporting companies that provide additional bonuses of credits or rebates for those that are paying prevailing wages, that are providing apprenticeships, and that are using domestic manufacturing. So there's a huge push within IRA to encourage domestic use of resources and to make sure that we're paying a living wage for these people, right? And we're trying to encourage that. So, Congress got creative at additional bonuses for those. I found this great graphic online that I think really helps paint the picture of what we're talking about. Each block is 5 million tons of carbon prevented. And we're talking about the biggest blocks being in transportation and clean electricity, but there's also funding there for industrial, right? Directly for buildings and for land use. And so it's very cross-cutting as it relates to this whole approach to addressing the climate crisis. Now, in addition to credits, there's also IRA rebates. And the rebates are intending to support especially low-income households that might not have tax appetites to take advantage of these credits and help them with lowering the cost of some of these efficiency and electrification solutions. So you can see here, SKEP will manage 4 of the IRA rebate provisions. That includes the homes provision, this whole house rebate, which is $4.3 billion. And a lot of what we're talking about here internally, like Jigger Shaw with the Loan Programs Office, has been looking at this rebate as a way to enable virtual power plants. We feel that the homes rebate, because it has a measured and a performance pathway, you can enable virtual power plants and utilities to think about connected distributed energy resources and using that as part of the grid, right? As part of their mission. Number 2 is this home electrification rebates, $4.5 billion to help with, low-income households electrifying, moving from gas systems into electric. 4.5 billion is a lot. And I'll say the complexity behind both of these, there are several complexities, which is the reason why we don't have a lot of details yet. The complexity is that they require a point of sale and income verification of this rebate, meaning that when somebody goes to your home improvement store to get a heat pump water heater, the idea is that they don't have to buy it and then submit paperwork in order to get some type of credit or rebate or whatever from the federal government. No. This is intended to literally drop the price at the cash register. So point of sale rebate to make it that much more accessible and affordable for people. So, and some of these can be 80% of the asset, depending on the level of income, right? So the lower income households get higher bonuses and higher rebates for that same equipment. And that's the complexity, right? We can't be at the cash register at one of these stores and have somebody bring their, tax returns to prove at what level of income they're at, right? That won't work. And there are ways that states have done this in the past that we're learning about. But the point is that we need a ubiquitous solution. And these rebates are going to be managed by each state. So DOE is going to fund the states, and the states are the ones that are going to administer the rebates in each one of their own states. So we need to get very clear at the guidance of how the states go about doing that and making sure that we minimize fraud, waste, and abuse of this money. You can imagine that there could be some nefarious, actions of trying to get billions of, money that's coming down. So that's really exciting, though. The 2 rebates that we have for homes, that's $8.8 billion of rebates to help homes electrify. There is that $200 million contractor training grant that you can see there, and then $1 billion for building code adoptions. So a lot of cities are working on building performance standards or building benchmarking and transparency laws and the like. Well, guess what? There's now money that can go directly to states and local governments to support them with adopting the latest building energy codes that focus on net zero, the net zero provisions, and other stretch code requirements, even electrification codes for EVs, right? EV readiness codes are becoming quite popular. So anywho, $1 billion is a lot of money to support states and communities with driving forward adoption of these codes. We're very excited about the opportunity to roll that out. In closing, we've been talking about a lot of money, but there's a ton of tools and technical assistance, aka consulting support and data that you can get access to, and really just ways in which we can convene peers in various exchanges to help communities through this process. So I did want to just flag that SKEP does provide technical assistance across the board in creating tools, in convening peers, in providing data. And so I encourage you all to join some of these great programs like the Better Buildings Challenge. If you haven't heard of the Better Buildings Challenge yet, this is something local governments are participating in voluntarily, but by joining that, you get access to a bunch of DOE and lab experts to help you through that process of reducing your building energy use at no cost to the city, right? That's the type of technical support. We also have some great tools that are out there you should be aware of. SLOPE, the State and Local Planning for Energy platform, is an incredible tool. It's free, it's online, and it provides insights into basically local energy and decarbonization planning. It has a scenario planner that looks out into the future and helps you understand everything from energy consumption to CO2 emissions, projected out. It also has a data viewer that provides layers of environmental justice data and energy burden data for you to better understand how your community is dealing with some of those challenges. And then there is one that's more EJ tool that's more focused on this low-income energy affordability tool, data tool, and that's providing kind of this customizable data set and various maps that provide insight across all census tracts in America in terms of energy burden and other housing characteristics. So it's a free tool. These are examples of tools that DOE has created because of the outreach of community saying we need this in order to support our planning. And so that's another function that we play as DOE. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share. There's a lot, as you can see, that we're fielding here at the department. There's a lot more guidance that's going to be coming out about the IRA rebates. And so although the Department of Energy is helping with some of to field and manage some of those rebates, Department of Treasury and the IRS are really the lead agencies for the tax credits. So I serve on a bunch of working groups for the different tax credits, but right now we're literally back and forth daily about how to define certain things in statute and therefore provide guidance on how the tax credits might apply to you personally. So keep a lookout. There will be an RFI, request for information, coming out in December for all of the tax credits and the rebates for IRA. And I believe there are a couple out there now that are trying to seek input. And so I'll try to find the link and send that to Sam and Sarah so that you all can certainly provide any feedback that you have about the IRA credits. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and maybe we dive into some discussion as we close out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. As always, you were just a wealth of information, and my head is spinning with all kinds of ideas and opportunities. So thank you so much for that information. I do have a handful of questions that have come in via chat. So I'm going to go ahead and just ask those to you on behalf of the folks that chatted in. And if anyone does have additional questions, please chat them to me, and we'll just rapid fire through them for as long as Chris wants to stay with us. The first question comes from Robin, and she asks about credits, rebates, and incentives that multifamily owners, operators, and developers can go after. I'd actually like to add on to that. If you could also talk about single family builders and developers and what kinds of credits, rebates, and incentives that right now of they can access.
Multifamily is a hot button item. We were in a briefing with the secretary just this past week, and she continues to lean in on the fact that this is a market that is, under invested in as it relates to our work, and very difficult to address, quite frankly, because of the split incentive challenges that we all know about. So I'm going to take that question back to the team and see if I can get you some specifics on which incentives, which rebates might apply directly to multifamily as well as to developers themselves. I do know that there are some incentives or tax credits in IRA that are trying to get at new home developments and trying to drive them towards higher efficiency beyond Energy Star home certification. So those are things that I can certainly circle back to you, Sarah.
Super. Yeah, that'd be great. And I think if you can get that to me, then I can forward that to Robin, but we'll also probably, have a follow-up series of that has updates as you learn more and share that with us. All right. And then anything on the single family side in particular that you want to point to, Chris?
I'll circle back for both of them.
Okay, great. All right. Then the next question is from Mike. And he's interested in the section of the IRA that falls under the purview of HUD, which apparently addresses both energy and water. So can you talk a little bit about anything you know about the funding that may go through HUD?
I don't actually know specifics about the funding that will go through HUD.
Right.
So definitely add it to the list of questions, and I'm happy to try to navigate here internally with our Office of Policy that certainly would have a lot more insight on which provision exactly.
Sorry that we're throwing some doozies at you.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry I don't have those details yet. And like I said, we're literally going through this as we speak on a daily basis. So I think a lot more, we'll see more guidance clearly outlined into Q1 of next, and that will certainly indicate how everybody can play. But right now it's a little bit of an uncertain thing. And even if I did provide an answer, it could change. It could very much change like tomorrow. So yeah. I want to be careful not to give away information that isn't fully accurate.
Sure. All right. So Charlie is asking about land use. Will any funding go towards incentivizing grazing land to be rewilded?
Well, I know that there is a growing interest, Charlie, not just in the Orlando area, but across the country to look at land use as part of the climate strategy and protecting our urban forests and protecting the green space that we do have within and around our communities to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to support habitat, to mitigate inland flooding, all that good stuff. I don't know specifically which provision touches on the land use, but there is IRA money that goes to supporting communities with trying to protect land. And I think we want to add that one to the list, and I'll try to get you some insights here.
Super. Now, John points out that you were to states being able to access funding, and he is wondering if Puerto Rico will also benefit from these programs.
Oh, 100%. Puerto Rico is part of the allocation, not just for the state energy program, that's the 50 states, 5 territories, and DC. And Puerto Rico certainly is one of those territories that gets a direct formula allocation for the state energy program, for the Weatherization Assistance Program, as well as the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program that I mentioned. We just met with the Puerto Rico State Energy Office there to talk about some of these provisions and how they can start to get ready for what's coming. And of course, in Puerto Rico, there's a whole effort around the Puerto Rico 100 study in order to move it to 100% clean energy. FEMA is managing an entire recovery effort since Maria and Irma for several years, and it will continue to help with revitalizing the Puerto Rican grid, transmission and distribution grid. There's a lot going on there with the local utility as well. And so, but these funds, to answer the question directly, will certainly go to Puerto Rico so that they can start driving clean energy on the ground.
Great, thank you. Now, Amanda asks about specifically the rebates within the IRA. And she says that states are awaiting guidelines from the DOE for how to apply for funding. Can you speak to that and any particular guidance that you have been given or any expected timing?
Yeah, certainly we are working very closely with the National Association of State Energy Officials, also known as NASEO. NASEO has created an entire working group made up of the directors of the state energy offices across the country to help walk through and discuss some of these challenging provisions that I talked about that are in statute, everything around the income verification, the point of sale, how to minimize fraud, waste, and abuse, the reporting aspect. I mean, there's about a dozen things that we're needing to answer. And what DOE does not want to do is answer it for the states without input. Because ultimately the states have to manage and administer these rebates. It's not DOE administering these for each individual households. DOE will have 50 grants that go to all the states and the territories. Those grants then are going to be administered by the state energy offices, right? So I will say that there will be an RFI, request for information, for input in December. And we're planning that now. We're going through the exec sec process to get those live and post it to the public so that you all can apply and submit your input. And so December we'll have an RFI. We anticipate into kind of Q2 of next year where there will be guidance that may be published at that point. And so the RFI will be for the public, but also NASIO's input with their working group, and then we'll publish that guidance. So probably more like Q2 of 2023 when we'll have guidance for the states on how they can pull down that money and start to roll out those rebates. And I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, because everybody thinks that the rebates can be done like today. And the challenge is that they cannot be done today. There are some calculators out there saying that you can, and that's concerning because you can't. And so we're working very, very quickly and diligently to make sure that we publish those so that it's streamlined, it's easy to participate for both the contractor, for the homeowner, for the state that's managing it, and for DOE that's overseeing and administering the money at large. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Now, it's clear that things are still evolving, but if there are any states that kind of are leading the charge with respect to being creative about implementing IRA funding and rebates.
Currently, no states are doing anything with IRA rebates because they don't have the guidance for them, right? So we're going to continue to work through that guidance directly with the states. We have had conversations already with the state of California and a few others that are, trying to get ahead of it and ask these same type of questions. And the responses are like, well, we're working through that guidance, and we really want your state energy offices to ensure that they're providing input through that working group that we've set up with NASIO. So that's the best way for states to get involved and make sure that their voices are heard in this process. And so I very much encourage you, if you're connected to your state energy office, please reach out to them, as I've mentioned before, start building that relationship, but also let them know that if they're not already involved in the working group through NASIO, that's probably the best way for them to plug in and provide direct input, in addition to the RFI, which would be open to the general public. And of course, states can apply directly to the RFI if they wanted. Some might do that. Some might just say, here's our memo from NASIO and our guidance to DOE. So no models just yet, but I know states are thinking about them.
Okay. And Connor asks if there are any specific benchmarks or units of measurement that are being looked at with respect to kind of measuring decarbonization, or it's a two-part question, any specific certifications that you're looking at for the workforce development?
All great questions, Connor, and I don't have good answers for you yet. Those are being discussed. Those are part of the deliberations right now between Treasury and the IRS and DOE to further clarify those credits. So, yep, we'll have those issued when guidance is out. Okay, great.
John asks if there's anything that can be done with insurance companies to give preferential rates for energy efficient housing, HVAC, or electrification.
That's a good question. I don't know. Please add it to the list, and I'll try to navigate that internally here.
Okay.
Part of me doing this is really getting some of these really great questions that are coming from the public, so that we might be able to pull together an FAQ that speaks to some of these. We do have an FAQ coming out, by the way, for the rebates, the rebate side that SKEP will manage. So that's coming shortly. I did put my eyes on a draft yesterday, and I think it's going through the final review process. So soon we will have insight on some of that.
Great. Now, Andrew asks if there are any grants that you know of that will be going to companies working in building materials reuse.
Building materials reuse. I don't know, not off the top of my head, but another one that I'd love to learn myself. If there's something out there for it, I will certainly look through.
Great. Okay.
I feel like I'm not providing very good insight for you all here, so I'm sorry about that. But I will certainly do some some internal kind of digging and trying to see if I can answer some of these questions for you.
Sure. And Chris, we know that this is all in the early stages, and we're putting you on the spot here. So We appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
So I'll just keep rapid firing for a few more minutes and we'll see, if we can
Well,
get.
can I open it up for my question that I wanted to engage this group with?
Absolutely. And
maybe in the last few minutes.
yeah. Mhm.
So we at the Department of Energy in SKEP are being asked by the Secretary and leadership to think about what does it mean for DOE to provide more meaningful engagement to communities? How do we define community engagement? What does DOE having a ground game mean to you when you hear that? How might DOE be best supportive for this work on the ground as you're seeing all of this money and all of these tax credits? Like, are there things that we can do to support the navigation and to better braid and blend these different programs? And so I would love to just hear any thoughts about what DOE might be able to do, and these are just open-ended ideas.
Mhm. And Chris, should we just have people maybe chat in?
They can chat, they can take themselves off of mute and put your camera on, and we can do it either way.
Okay. Does anyone want to respond to that question?
Community engagement. How does DOE support community engagement? How do we support the community-based organizations on the ground, in addition to identifying funding that can go to them, which we're trying to find? And in certain ways, we're able to, like the Energy Futures Assistance Grant, right? I had on there is one of those that could actually fund CBOs to do some work. But in addition to that, are there other things DOE can be doing? Nathan, go for it.
Hey there. Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and it's something that we at Southface are trying to help answer ourselves. But I come from a little bit of a background in innovation, and in innovation, we did a lot with journeys and trying to understand customer journeys and journey maps and really outline, how to get from A to Z, and what are the barriers that are going to exist as someone tries to get from A to Z, and really just trying to minimize those barriers as much as possible. Language being a significant barrier. So, a lot of people understand from a lot of publicity that this funding exists, especially the rebates. However, no one knows what a state energy office is in the general public. Of course we do, but a lot of people don't. And so, just as much as possible, just trying to outline what the journey is, what that map looks like, and minimize those barriers as much as possible, make it as easy as possible to understand, and really level setting on expectations. I think that with a lot going through state energy offices, there's a little bit of uncertainty and fear about, the level of effort that's going to be required and the lift that's going to be required for that. Certainly organizations like ours and NASIO, as you identified, are doing whatever we can to help support that. But we are also a part of the learning journey, a part of the customer success journey, and we are having challenges ourselves, just trying to understand all the different pieces, and especially if it's going to be different between the different states, how to navigate that.
Thank you, Nathan. That's helpful. And I love the idea of this kind of a journey map for a community or different stakeholders that have different maps of that journey, but to help understand those key milestone points or ways to intervene, I think it's a great point.
Thank you.
And we are not ignorant to the fact that there are some challenges politically in certain states as it relates to, energy offices and some of them, even whether they're going to accept some of this money because of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so we're trying to make sure that through this guidance, it's something that is ubiquitous and could be easily adopted by any given state, no matter their lean.
Chris, it looks like Charlie has a comment on this, and then move on to the next question, and take one or two responses, just because I want to be cognizant of everyone's time.
It'd be great.
Sure. Chris, I'm just underlining what Stephen Ledger seems to be saying in the chat, is that Zoom calls like this are actually wonderful for hitting directly to people, getting the information out there to people. You're the first person from DC who's been on a Zoom call with me, and this is very important to use the latest tech and get it out there for people.
Nice. That's helpful. I threw that out there. Regular office hours. Maybe there's a regular kind of ongoing webinar that SKEP hosts on a monthly basis. Anybody can join, and you can kind of go through and ask some of these questions. I mean, that's one thing that for me is a light lift and seems like a natural fit of something we can start to do here. But we're also thinking bigger beyond that. We're also thinking like, how do we get into the communities, and maybe from a regional approach, like might we be able to, support them almost like a chief planner would in a community, right? To really think about the various pieces of an energy transition and help convene, help navigate the funding, stuff like that.
And make sure it's not during 9 to 5 for all those low-income people who need to be at work.
Great point. Yeah, timing is critical. Remember that from community groups that we used to do, right?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen, you came off, or you came on video. I don't know if you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, the second part I had, besides the Zoom calls, which obviously I'm loving, is maybe like a tool, like a form where a person could just fill out all their personal information. They could put their income, they could put where they're living, and then after they input all the relevant information that you guys are looking for, it'll tell them, hey, look, these are all the possible things they can get approved for, and then maybe with links, taking them to maybe the IRS form or whatever when those things roll out. But some kind of form where like, hey, I'm sitting with somebody and they want to know what, hey, I'm thinking about getting an electric vehicle. I'm thinking about weatherization. I'm thinking about all these things.
Mm-hmm.
They can input just some relevant information, and they can tell them maybe even perhaps projections on how much they save their carbon offset, but just to direct them directly to where they could benefit quickly.
Love it.
That'd be cool.
Great idea. Definitely something we've been thinking through as well. There is a website, by the way, that is important you all to know. It's cleanenergy.gov. Forgot to mention that in my formal remarks, but cleanenergy.gov has been created by the White House and the DOE to help with some of that, Stephen. It's kind of you go through each individual provision and you can kind of see what's coming, what can you benefit from now, what will come in the future, and it breaks it down from the different types of technologies in your home. So cleanenergy.gov. Awesome. Yeah, great tool, but I think we need to go beyond that, right? To your point, we need to, bring it down to something that's personable, that somebody can put in their information and tailor it to their household and say, all right, within my community, here are my utility rebates, here's what the state and the cities provide, and the federal, right? Give them the whole picture and Desire, that database for state incentives for efficiency and renewables. Desire is a fantastic tool that might be able to plug into that, right? So I'm already thinking through how that comes together.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, Sarah, I think we've hit time. This was fantastic. And again, apologies for not having a lot of specifics on the IRA, but I will go back to our Office of Policy and I'll try to answer as many of those as I can. And yeah, maybe again into the spring of 2023, we do another round of these. And when we do have all that guidance that's coming out, we can do another one of these sessions to dive into the details and bring also other colleagues from the Office of Policy, from our Economic Impact and Diversity Office, and maybe others to kind of maybe do a virtual panel of sort.
I think that's a great idea, Chris. I think we should just plan on doing regular updates because clearly people are interested. I will actually get to you the chat log because there's some great questions that we didn't have time for. And then maybe next time around, we can just schedule out and plan on even more time for interaction so that we can try to get some questions answered. I actually think it worked out all right today because, so much that's up in the air and I felt asking questions.
I wanted to give you the full picture of like what's happening and the reorg. I mean, there's a lot of amazing things happening. So I know you want the details and the specifics, they're coming.
Yes, indeed.
But yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I mean, I think on behalf of everyone that was on this call today, thank you not only for, your insights and the information today, but thank you for your great work. Thank you for your leadership. And we look forward to the next discussion with you as things evolve and you have a next round of updates. And then again, everyone on this call, please join us next time around and we'll spend some more time getting to some of the questions.
Sounds great.
Yes.
Keep up the great work.
Sarah.
Yeah, and thank you and to our partners in our today's homeowner content, which is Whirlpool, Jinko Solar, Sonos, MyQ by LiftMaster, and Vivint. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.